Imagine you are standing next to a giraffe. Not a small one, but a particularly tall, majestic male. It towers over you, maybe 5.5 meters high, reaching the roof of a single-story house. Now, let your brain process this information. The creature standing next to you is about to sprout wings and take flight. No, this is not a fever dream triggered by bad sushi. This is the reality of Quetzalcoatlus northropii, the undisputed heavyweight champion of the skies. For the longest time, when the average dino-normie pictured a pterosaur, they imagined pterodactylus, small dive-bombing seagull lookalikes, maybe snatching up a quick fish for dinner. Cute, manageable, scientifically neat. Then you have Quetzalcoatlus, an animal so bizarre, so utterly massive, that when scientists first pieced together its skeleton, they openly questioned the laws of physics. They looked at the bones and basically told gravity to RIP. This wasn't a bird. This wasn't even what you think of as a typical pterosaur. This was an absolute unit of biological engineering, a creature so specialized and terrifying that its existence redefines the limits of what life can achieve. It was a 5-story high predator that spent its days stalking the late Cretaceous plains, not soaring over the ocean. It was a colossal, terrestrial winged nightmare fuel. Today we are diving deep into the terrifying complexity of Quetzalcoatlus, how it walked, how it flew, and why the old theories about it being a clumsy, wind-dependent glider were completely wrong. Get ready, because the true story of the largest flying animal in history is far stranger and much scarier than you ever imagined. Our story begins in the scorching heat of Big Bend National Park, Texas, way back in 1971. A graduate student named Douglas A. Lawson was meticulously scanning the exposed rock layers of the Javelina Formation, a rich window into the Maastrichtian Age, the final chapter of the Cretaceous period, just a few short million years before the great asteroid delivered extinction. Lawson wasn't looking for the biggest flying animal ever. Honestly, no one was. The conventional wisdom at the time capped flying reptile weight significantly lower, maybe at the size of a very large albatross. Lawson found a fragment, a gigantic, strangely hollow piece of bone. It was so large and so robustly structured, yet feather-light and fragile due to its ultra-thin walls, that the initial thought was that it must have belonged to an unknown, exceptionally large theropod dinosaur, perhaps a bizarre, flightless carnivore. But as more fragments were carefully excavated and pieced together, specifically the humerus, the massive upper arm bone, the truth became inescapable. This was not a leg bone. This was a wing bone. The dimensions were staggering. That humerus alone was nearly the length of an average human femur. When the full wingspan was extrapolated from this single magnificent bone, the numbers shot past anything previously recorded. We're talking 10 to 11 meters, easily matching the wingspan of a small fighter jet or a sailplane. Compare that to the wandering albatross, the largest modern bird, which manages a respectable 3.7 meters. Quetzalcoatlus wasn't just bigger. It was operating on an entirely different scale of existence. This monumental creature was named after Quetzalcoatl, the Aztec feathered serpent deity. And trust me, the name is deserved. This immediately presented a biological paradox that baffled scientists for decades. How much did this thing weigh? And how could something that heavy achieve active flight? Early estimates, based on the assumption that Quetzalcoatlus had the robust musculature and bone density of flying birds, projected weights anywhere from 150 kilos all the way up to a terrifying, biologically impossible 540 kilos. If it weighed half a ton, its takeoff speed would have needed to exceed 100 miles per hour just to generate lift, which is absolutely unsustainable and, frankly, hilarious to picture. However, subsequent research, particularly focused on comparative anatomy with modern birds and the specialized Ajdarchid structure, brought the estimates down significantly. Here's where the scientific rigor meets the physical reality. Pterosaur bones are highly pneumatic. Think of them less like solid dinosaur bone and more like the internal structure of a bike frame, mostly air, riddled with incredibly sophisticated struts and internal braces. These air sacs, which extended throughout the skeleton, were likely connected to an advanced respiratory system, making the animal incredibly light for its volume. Modern consensus, driven by studies utilizing volumetric and mass distribution models from the University of London and Brown University, generally settles on a mass range between 70 kilos and 250 kilos for the largest specimens. Q. Northropi. Even at the low end of 70 kilos, that's still the weight of an average adult human being attached to 11 meters of wing, a biological structure 10 times the size of anything flying today. If you pictured a wing made of carbon fiber and stretched skin the length of a Honda Civic, that's what we are dealing with. This is why it's an absolute unit. There is also a smaller relative, Quetzalcoatlus lawsoni, formerly known as QSP, which had a wingspan closer to 4 or 5 meters. While still large, Q. Lawsoni gives us invaluable insight into the growth stages and ecology of the whole family, suggesting the giants weren't the only ones out there. They just happened to be the ones built like aerial refrigerators. For years, the dino-normie narrative painted pterosaurs as creatures bound to the coasts, reliant on strong sea winds and cliffs to get airborne. Under this old model, Quetzalcoatlus was imagined as a spectacular but ultimately clumsy glider, a creature that likely struggled on land, dragging its gigantic wings awkwardly, looking like a drunk pelican trying to parallel park. This theory has been almost entirely discarded. The true nightmare fuel factor of Quetzalcoatlus is not in the sky, but on the ground. Quetzalcoatlus and its Ajdarchid cousins, like the terrifying Hatzegopteryx, were highly specialized terrestrial predators. Forget the oceans, these animals dominated the inland floodplains of North America. They were the apex predators of the air, sure, but they were also formidable and truly bizarre hunters on foot. Look at the skeleton. The legs were long and robust, but crucially the forelimbs, the arms that powered the wings, were disproportionately sturdy. They were not just arms, they were load-bearing secondary legs. This brings us to the famous quadrupedal stance. When Quetzalcoatlus walked, it didn't shuffle bipedally like a bad movie monster. It moved on all fours. Its stance was similar to that of a modern giraffe or large hoofed mammal, with the wing fingers tucked neatly, ensuring the delicate wing membrane, patagium, was protected. Researchers from the University of Texas, meticulously analyzing trackways and biomechanical models, concluded that Quetzalcoatlus moved with a sophisticated gait, capable of striding speeds perhaps up to 8 miles per hour. This wasn't a sluggish waddle. This was a purposeful high-stepping stalk. Imagine that giraffe comparison again. A 5.5-meter tall creature, standing with its head elevated far above the tallest trees, scanning the landscape. Its legs were digitigrade, walking on the toes, making it quick and agile despite its size. Its arms were plantigrade, walking on the palms, or in this case the highly adapted wing metacarpals, providing stability. This combination resulted in an incredibly efficient long-distance walker. Why was this necessary? Because this absolute unit didn't hunt fish, it hunted everything else. To understand Quetzalcoatlus, you have to understand the environment of Maastrichtian Texas. It wasn't the lush, humid jungle typically associated with the Cretaceous. It was a semi-arid floodplain environment, characterized by seasonal rivers, wide-open plains, and sparse, tough vegetation. Crucially, it was a land dominated by massive prey, such as the colossal sauropod Alamosaurus. Quetzalcoatlus's skull reinforces its predatory style. It had an extremely long, pointed, and surprisingly thin beak, lacking any teeth. Early assumptions suggested it might skim the water like some modern birds, but the physics of such a huge animal trying to scoop water at speed proved impossible. Furthermore, Ajdarchid fossils are overwhelmingly found inland, miles away from coastal ecosystems. The prevailing theory today is that Quetzalcoatlus was a generalized terrestrial predator, fulfilling an ecological niche similar to modern ground hornbills, cranes, or marabou storks, but operating at the size of a light utility pole. It would stride across the landscape using its immense height to spot movement from afar. Its diet likely consisted of anything it could swallow whole: baby dinosaurs, the short kings of the Cretaceous, lizards, snakes, roadkill and nope ropes if they were slow, small mammals, large amphibians, and even carrion. The hunting technique? Picture this. The giant approaches a nest of baby titanosaurs. It lowers its giraffe-like neck, uses its exceptionally long, tweezers-like jaws to quickly stab and snatch the prey, tossing it back like a pelican swallowing a fish. The sheer reach of its neck meant it could strike targets 15 feet away without moving its torso, maximizing stealth and minimizing effort. It was the master of reach out and touch someone. It was a true opportunist, capable of traversing vast distances in search of localized prey sources, ensuring its massive energy requirements were always met. Now for the part that terrified the scientific community for 50 years, getting airborne. If you are a 200-kilogram creature with fragile bones, you cannot just run down a hill and flap until you lift off. A traditional bird takeoff requires massive leg power to achieve high initial velocity. Quetzalcoatlus' legs, while strong for walking, were relatively short compared to its immense wingspan, rendering the standard bird takeoff model completely unfeasible. If you ran it through a 2010 biomechanics simulation, the legs just didn't generate enough wattage. Enter the brilliant and slightly horrifying solution, the Ajdarchid launch model, often called the quadrupedal vault or catapult launch. Instead of launching primarily with its legs, Quetzalcoatlus used its gigantic, immensely muscular forelimbs, those secondary legs, to vault itself into the air. Here's the step-by-step breakdown of this bizarre maneuver, which has been rigorously tested using sophisticated computer models. 1. The pterosaur crouches low, shifting its massive center of gravity back. 2. It generates immense power in its arm muscles, likely fueled by a vast and complex pectoral girdle. 3. It pushes off simultaneously with its arms and legs. Crucially, the arms, the main support structure on the ground, push off last and hardest. 4. The power of the arm push generates an explosive vertical acceleration, launching the entire mass upward and forward in a dramatic, almost gymnastic vault. Think of an Olympic athlete doing a vault, but instead of landing safely, they use that vertical momentum to immediately transition into a powered downstroke of the wings. The powerful arm push essentially buys the pterosaur a few critical seconds in height, generating enough immediate air pressure over the wings to initiate the transition from zero velocity on the ground to full flight. A 2012 study confirmed that this mechanism, while seeming utterly alien, was the only way an animal of this size could generate the necessary lift coefficient without requiring an aircraft carrier runway. It was a truly powerful, if slightly chaotic, start. RIP ground safety. Once airborne, Quetzalcoatlus was an unparalleled master of the air. Due to its high aspect ratio wings, long, narrow, and efficient, it was built for energy conservation, riding thermals like a prehistoric sailplane. It could likely traverse hundreds, if not thousands, of kilometers in a single journey, soaring silently over the heads of the sauropods below. It was, quite literally, a global observation platform made of flesh and bone. Speaking of complex engineering, are you tired of your ancient, brittle gear? Are your current headphones failing you faster than a discarded theory about Quetzalcoatlus weight? Then you need to check out Kronos Crunchies. Kronos Crunchies isn't just a sponsor. It's the fuel you need to crush your own paleontological research or maybe just your workday. These aren't just snacks. They are scientifically formulated, high-energy clusters designed to give you the mental clarity needed to understand why a 200-kilo reptile was walking around like a hyper-aggressive runway model. We're fueled by Kronos Crunchies, available in 3 prehistoric flavors: Trilobite Toast, Mosasaur Mint, and the classic Absolute Unit T-Rex Treat. Stop chewing on those lackluster modern snacks. Get your hands on Kronos Crunchies today. Link is in the description. Now back to our winged terror. Quetzalcoatlus was not alone in its bizarre niche. It belonged to the family Ajdarchidae, a lineage of late Cretaceous pterosaurs that universally adopted this long-necked, terrestrial stalking lifestyle. Understanding the other members helps us contextualize the sheer monstrosity of Q. northropi. Perhaps the most robust Ajdarchid was Hatzegopteryx thambema, found in Romania. Hatzegopteryx was roughly comparable in wingspan, around 10-12 meters, but was far more heavily built, often described as having a short, broad, massive skull, a flying battering ram. It lived on a late Cretaceous island, Hayteg Island, where its massive size made it the supreme apex predator, filling the role T-Rex occupied elsewhere. The existence of Hatzegopteryx reinforces the concept that these giants were not fragile gliders, but immensely powerful creatures capable of handling massive impact stress, whether from takeoff, landing, or subduing large prey. The skull structure of Quetzalcoatlus was lighter, suggesting a more specialized probe and snatch hunter. whereas Hatzegopteryx was likely built to take down larger, more struggling prey in its island environment. Even the smaller members, like the aforementioned Q. lawsoni, a relative short king at 4.5 meters, show adaptations for quadrupedal walking. This proves that the strategy, the long neck, the robust arms, the terrestrial diet, was successful across the board and across different body sizes. In fact, one of the most significant insights into Quetzalcoatlus mobility came not from a massive bone, but from a juvenile specimen. A 2023 study by paleontologists from the University of California analyzed juvenile bone fragments and determined that young Quetzalcoatlus were likely capable of flight almost immediately after hatching. This super precociality suggests they didn't need extensive parental care and quickly adopted the nomadic, wide-ranging lifestyle required to hunt successfully in a sparse environment. They were independent, tiny terrors almost right out of the shell. If taking off was a challenge of physics, landing was an exercise in precision. Picture trying to land an F-16 fighter jet without a runway, relying solely on muscle power and air braking. Quetzalcoatlus had to slow down its enormous mass and wingspan to a manageable speed, without snapping its ultralight pneumatic bones. Studies suggest that, like most large pterosaurs, Quetzalcoatlus would utilize a complex aerodynamic stall procedure. It would use its entire body as a giant air brake, pitching its wide wings high, increasing drag, and extending its arms and legs to reduce velocity. The actual touchdown would have been extremely delicate. It couldn't slam its relatively fragile feet down like a modern raptor. Instead, once the airspeed was minimized, it would transition back into its powerful four-point stance. It essentially landed on its arms first, using those robust forelimbs to absorb the remaining vertical impact, before steadying itself on its hind legs and walking away, utterly unfazed by the feat of engineering it just performed. If the landing was botched, the result would likely be devastating. An 11-meter-wide creature falling from the sky, instantly becoming roadkill. This high-risk maneuver demanded incredible coordination and brain power, suggesting Quetzalcoatlus had highly developed neurological centers dedicated to flight control and spatial awareness. Quetzalcoatlus reigned supreme during the last few million years of the Cretaceous. It survived the pressures of competing with tyrannosaurs, giant sauropods, and every other predator on the North American continent by occupying a unique, highly mobile niche. But even this flying behemoth could not escape the inevitable. 66 million years ago, a 10-kilometer-wide asteroid slammed into the Yucatan Peninsula. The resulting impact triggered global climate catastrophe, massive earthquakes, tsunamis, and most critically, years of impact winter, blocking the sun and collapsing food webs worldwide. While dinosaurs like Triceratops and Tyrannosaurus faced the brunt of the shockwaves and fires, Quetzalcoatlus faced a catastrophic lack of resources. Its specialized diet, requiring frequent massive inputs of energy gleaned from widely scattered prey, became untenable. The short kings, the lizards, the baby dinosaurs, they all vanished as the plant life died off. It is believed that the very largest flyers, including Quetzalcoatlus and Hatzegopteryx, were the first to face extinction among the pterosaurs, precisely because their massive size necessitated massive resources. Smaller pterosaurs and birds with lower metabolic demands had a slightly better, though still grim, chance. The giant that defied gravity and dominated the sky was finally beaten by physics itself, the thermodynamics of a dying planet. Quetzalcoatlus, the absolute unit, vanished from the skies forever. R.I.P. Quetzalcoatlus stands as a powerful reminder of the incredible plasticity of evolution. It proved that size limits in flight are determined not just by weight, but by biomechanical innovation. By making its arms load-bearing catapults and its bones airy masterpieces, life managed to push the biological speed limit right up to the stratosphere. There is nothing remotely close to this creature flying today. Modern birds have taken flight in a different, more constrained direction. The closest we get to that terrestrial stalker dynamic is maybe a large marabou stork, but even that looks like a pigeon compared to a living, walking airplane. When we look back at Quetzalcoatlus, we are not just looking at a fossil. We are looking at a living contradiction, a creature that spent decades convincing paleontologists they had calculated the maximum size of flight incorrectly. It was a flying giraffe, a nightmare stalker, and a monument to the bizarre, wonderful, and terrifying ingenuity of the lost world. Thanks for watching. And until next time on The Lost World.